All right, so my third video back, and I'm hoping I'm able to keep up this one post every 2-day schedule. I'll try to improve on that, but you already know, it's still your favorite narrator. So let's get into the story.
My wife handed me divorce papers at dinner and then said I still expect the same amount in my account on the 1st of every month. She slid them across the table between the salt shaker and the casserole I had just made because Tuesdays were my night to cook. My wife Nadine set a manila envelope in front of me and told me to open it while she kept eating like she hadn't just ended an 11-year marriage between bites of chicken. I opened it. Divorce papers. Already filled out. Already signed on her side. A yellow sticky note on the last page that said sign here with a smiley face. A smiley face. I looked up at her and she was chewing and scrolling her phone, and she said without looking at me that she needed a better man and that I wasn't it, and that she had been thinking about it for a long time, and the decision was final. Then she said the part that made my hands go numb. She said she expected me to continue putting $3,000 into her personal account on the 1st of every month. The same amount I had been depositing for years so she could have spending money because Nadine did not work. Nadine had not worked in 9 years. She stopped working 2 years into our marriage because she said her job at the insurance office was draining her energy and she needed time to figure out what she really wanted to do with her life. I said, okay. That was my answer to most things Nadine asked for. Okay. She wanted to quit her job. Okay. She wanted $3,000 a month in a separate account. Okay. She wanted to redecorate the guest bedroom for the 3rd time in 2 years. Okay. She wanted to join a wine club that shipped 4 bottles a month at $65 a box. Okay. I said okay because I thought that's what a good husband did. I thought supporting your wife meant removing every obstacle between her and comfort. I thought the deal was, I work and she lives and we meet somewhere in the middle at the end of the day. What I didn't understand until much later was that we never met in the middle. I walked all the way to her side every single time and she stayed exactly where she was. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital where I worked as a radiology tech and covered everything. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, car payments, her credit cards, her hair appointments, the gym membership she used 3 times, her monthly subscriptions to 6 different streaming services and 2 clothing boxes, and a wine club she signed up for and forgot to cancel. I covered all of it and deposited $3,000 into her account every single month so she could have her own money, because she said it made her feel independent. Independent. She used that word a lot for someone who hadn't earned a paycheck since she was 29 years old. For 9 years, Nadine woke up after I left for work and spent the day doing whatever she wanted. She went to brunch. She went shopping. She redecorated rooms that didn't need redecorating. She took yoga classes and pottery classes and a 6-week photography course that cost $800 and resulted in 0 photographs. She had hobbies. Lots of hobbies. What she didn't have was a job or any interest in getting one because I had made her life comfortable enough that work became optional and eventually invisible. I asked her why she wanted a divorce. She put her phone down for the first time since she sat down and listed her reasons like she had rehearsed them. She said I worked too much. She said I was boring. She said I didn't take her on enough vacations. She said I had let myself go even though I was the same weight I was when we got married, and she had watched me leave for 12-hour shifts at 5 in the morning for a decade without once asking me if I was tired. She said she wanted someone who could give her the life she deserved. The life she deserved. The life she was living was funded entirely by me, and she was still somehow under the impression that she deserved more of it from someone else while also continuing to collect from me. I asked her how she planned to support herself after the divorce. She tilted her head like I had asked a strange question. She said that's what the $3,000 a month was for. She said she had gotten used to a certain lifestyle and it would be unfair for me to cut her off just because we weren't married anymore. I told her I needed time to read the papers, and she shrugged and took her plate to the living room and turned on one of her 6 streaming services. That was the end of the conversation for her. I called my older brother Niall that night from the garage. I sat on an upturned bucket next to the lawnmower I maintained because Nadine said grass allergies prevented her from going outside when I mowed, even though she'd never been tested for allergies and spent every Saturday at outdoor brunch patios without incident. Niall was a contractor who had been through his own divorce 5 years earlier, and he was the only person I trusted to tell me the truth without trying to fix it. I told him everything. I told him about the manila envelope and the sticky note and the smiley face and the $3,000 and the phrase, "I need a better man." I told him about the tilted head. I told him about the 6 streaming services. I told him she was sitting in the living room right now watching one of them, like we hadn't just had the conversation that ended our marriage. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I was done, he was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then he asked me one question. Is your name on everything? It was. The house was in my name. I bought it before we got married with money I saved from working doubles for 4 years. The cars were in my name. Both of them. Nadine drove a car that I purchased and insured and maintained because she said car stuff stressed her out. Every account was in my name or jointly held, which meant I could do what I did next. I called a divorce attorney the following morning. The attorney explained that because Nadine voluntarily left her job and had no disability or condition preventing her from working, a judge was unlikely to award long-term spousal support, especially since she was 38 years old and had a college degree and was fully capable of employment. She also explained that the house I bought before the marriage with my own money was considered separate property as long as I could show the purchase records. I could. I kept everything. I signed the papers. I gave Nadine exactly what she asked for, which was a divorce. What I did not give her was $3,000 a month or the house or the car she drove. The attorney handled all of it, and when Nadine got the counterfiling, she called me from her mother's house where she had moved the week before because she told everyone she was the one who left. She was furious. She said I had blindsided her. That was the word she used. Blindsided. The woman who slid divorce papers across a dinner table between bites of the casserole I made for her said that I had blindsided her. I told her I signed what she asked me to sign. She said not like this. She said her version of the papers had included a monthly support arrangement and property transfer, and what my attorney sent back had none of that. She said I was being vindictive. I said I was being accurate. She'd asked for a divorce and I gave her one. She never asked for the terms to be hers. She assumed they would be because every term in our marriage had been hers for 11 years, and she had no reason to believe the ending would be any different. She said this wasn't over. She said she had rights. She said 11 years as my wife entitled her to something. I said it entitled her to a divorce, which she was getting. I told her my attorney would be handling all further communication, and I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to Nadine directly for about 3 months. What happened during those 3 months is what I want to talk about, because that's when I found out who I had actually been married to. The first thing Nadine did was call everyone we knew. Not to tell them we were divorcing, to tell them her version of why. According to Nadine, I had changed. According to Nadine, I had become cold and controlling. According to Nadine, I was punishing her for wanting out of a marriage that wasn't fulfilling her needs. She told her friends, she told her family, she told the woman who cut her hair and the couple next door and my coworker's wife who she'd met once at a hospital holiday party. She seeded the narrative before I even knew there was one to contest. I found out because people started texting me, not asking me how I was doing, asking me why I was being so difficult, asking me why I wouldn't just let her have the house, asking me if it was true that I was trying to leave her with nothing after she gave me the best years of her life. The best years of her life. That phrase kept appearing like a slogan someone had coached her to use. As if the years she spent going to brunch on my money were some kind of sacrifice she'd made on my behalf. Nadine's mother called me 2 days after the counterfiling. Her name was Diane, and she had always been polite to me in the way that people are polite to furniture. She acknowledged my presence without ever engaging with it. Diane said Nadine was devastated. She said I was throwing away a woman who had given me the best years of her life. I asked Diane what Nadine had given me specifically. She said companionship. I said I had a dog for companionship, and the dog also didn't work, but at least the dog was happy to see me when I came home. Diane hung up. I know that sounds harsh, but I had been living with a version of myself that accepted everything and questioned nothing for over a decade, and that version of me died on a Tuesday night between the salt shaker and the casserole dish. I wasn't angry. I was awake. There's a difference. The next person to call was Nadine's best friend, a woman named Claudette who I'd never particularly liked because she was the one who went to every brunch and every shopping trip and every wine tasting with Nadine while I worked doubles to fund all of it. Claudette told me I was making a huge mistake. She said Nadine had options. She said Nadine had men who were interested. She said this like it was a threat, like I was supposed to hear that other men wanted my wife and suddenly decide to give her the house and $3,000 a month to prevent it. I said, Claudette, those men can have her. I hope they have deep pockets because she's expensive. Claudette called me heartless. I said no. I was a radiology tech making $78,000 a year who worked 12-hour shifts so his wife could take an $800 photography course that produced 0 photographs. That's not heartless. That's exhausted. The divorce proceedings started in earnest about a month later. Nadine hired her own attorney, which I later found out her mother paid for because Nadine had no money. She had $3,000 a month for 11 years. That's $396,000 in personal spending money over the course of our marriage, not including the credit cards and the subscriptions and the classes. And she had nothing saved. Zero. She walked into that marriage with a job and a savings account and walked out with neither because she had spent a decade treating my income like a natural resource that would never run out. Her attorney argued for spousal support on the grounds that Nadine had become accustomed to a certain standard of living and that my income had enabled it. My attorney presented a timeline. She showed that Nadine had voluntarily left employment. She showed that Nadine had a bachelor's degree in communications. She showed that Nadine had no children and no medical condition and no documented reason why she could not work. She showed that the house was purchased before the marriage with funds I earned before the marriage. She showed 9 years of bank statements where every dollar in Nadine's personal account came from a direct transfer from mine, and every dollar that left that account went to discretionary spending. Not savings, not investment, not necessity, brunch, clothes, classes, wine. The judge reviewed it. He asked Nadine directly why she had not worked in 9 years. Her attorney tried to frame it as a mutual decision. My attorney showed a text from 2015 where Nadine told me she wasn't going back to work, and I responded with okay, which her attorney tried to spin as agreement. My attorney then showed 6 subsequent texts over the years where I'd asked Nadine if she had thought about going back to work, and she'd either ignored the question or said she wasn't ready. The judge looked at those texts for a long time. He didn't award long-term support. He awarded Nadine 6 months of transitional support at $1,500 a month, half of what she demanded, to give her time to find employment. He left the house with me. He noted specifically that the house was purchased with premarital funds and that Nadine had not contributed to the mortgage in any documented way. He divided the jointly held savings account, which contained $41,000, and gave her half. The car she drove was awarded to her because it was paid off, and the judge considered it a reasonable asset split. Nadine cried in the courtroom. Not quiet tears. Loud, shaking sobs that echoed off the walls. Her mother rubbed her back. Her attorney looked at the floor. I sat in my chair and thought about the smiley face on the sticky note and how confident she had been that night at the dinner table. How certain she was that she could end a marriage and keep the paycheck. How she kept chewing while she told me she needed a better man. She wasn't crying because she lost me. She was crying because she lost the money. Nadine walked out of that courtroom with a paid-off car, $20,500 in savings, and 6 months of $1,500 checks. I walked out with my house, my career, and the first night of actual silence I'd had in 11 years. Niall came over that weekend with a 6-pack, and we sat on my back porch, and he said, "How do you feel?" I said, "I feel like someone turned the volume down." He said, "It gets better." I said, "I hope so." He said, "Trust me. The first month is weird, the second month is quiet, and the third month you start remembering who you were before you got lost in somebody else's life." He was right. In the weeks after the divorce was finalized, I started noticing things. I noticed that I had time. I came home from work, and the house was quiet, and nobody needed me to transfer money or fix a problem or listen to a complaint about a yoga instructor or a pottery class or a brunch spot that changed their menu. I cooked what I wanted. I watched what I wanted. I went to bed when I wanted. I hadn't realized how much of my daily life was organized around Nadine's comfort until her comfort was no longer my responsibility. I also noticed the money. I ran the numbers one night because I'm the kind of person who keeps spreadsheets, and I calculated exactly what Nadine had cost me over 11 years. The $3,000 monthly deposits alone totaled $396,000. Her credit card balances that I paid off every quarter averaged about $2,200, which over 11 years came to roughly $96,800. Her car, her insurance, her phone, her subscriptions, her classes, the gym she didn't use, the wine club she forgot about. When I added it all together, the number was just over $620,000. I made $78,000 a year, before taxes. I had given more than half my gross lifetime earnings during that marriage to a woman who called me boring and told me I had let myself go while I was working doubles so she could go to brunch. I stared at that spreadsheet for a long time, not because I wanted the money back, because I wanted to understand how I let it happen. And the answer was simple. I let it happen because I loved her, and love made me stupid and generous in ways that I didn't notice until the generosity was the only thing keeping the relationship alive. The second thing I noticed was the quiet, not the absence of noise, the absence of performance. For 11 years, I had come home to someone who needed me to respond to whatever her day had contained. The yoga instructor said something rude. The pottery class was too crowded. The brunch spot overcharged her. The clothing box sent the wrong size. Every evening was a debriefing session where I was expected to listen and validate and sympathize with problems that existed entirely inside a life I was funding. I never once came home and said I had a hard day. Not because I didn't have hard days, because Nadine didn't ask. She asked what was for dinner. She asked if I'd seen her phone charger. She asked if I'd transferred the $3,000 yet. She never asked if I was tired. Nadine had not loved me for years. Maybe she never did. Maybe she loved the $3,000. Maybe she loved the freedom and the brunches and the photography course and the 6 streaming services. Maybe she loved being independent on someone else's paycheck. I don't know. And after enough time passed, I stopped caring about the answer, because the answer didn't change the math, and the math was the only thing that was ever honest between us. I did find out about the better man, though. Claudette's threat about Nadine having options turned out to be real. About 4 months after the divorce, I heard from a mutual friend that Nadine was dating someone. A man named Greg who worked in pharmaceutical sales and drove a BMW and took her to restaurants I'd never been able to afford because I was too busy funding her personal account. The relationship lasted about 3 months. I heard it ended because Greg expected Nadine to split the bill sometimes and she found that demeaning. I didn't laugh when I heard that, but I understood it completely. Nadine didn't want a partner. She wanted a provider with no expectations. She wanted the $3,000 and the house and the car and the streaming services and the freedom to walk away whenever she decided the provider was boring. Greg figured that out in 3 months. It took me 11 years. 3 months after the divorce, Nadine got a job. Not because she wanted to, because the transitional support was running out and her mother's patience was running thinner. Diane called me one last time during that period to ask if I would consider extending the support payments voluntarily. She said Nadine was struggling. She said the job market was hard. She said Nadine hadn't worked in nearly a decade and re-entry was overwhelming. I said, Diane, I worked 12-hour shifts for a decade so your daughter could take pottery classes. She can fill out a job application. Diane said I'd become cruel. I said I'd become accurate. There's a recurring theme here, and it's that everyone around Nadine confused her discomfort with injustice. She wasn't being mistreated. She was being expected to function. Those are not the same thing. She got a position at a dental office doing administrative work. I heard from a mutual friend that she made $17 an hour. I did the math on that too because I couldn't stop doing math at that point. $17 an hour at full time came to about $35,000 a year before taxes. She had been receiving $36,000 a year in spending money alone from me, not counting the mortgage and the car and the utilities and everything else. Her entire salary at her new job was less than her old allowance. I didn't feel good about that. I didn't feel bad either. I felt the same thing I'd been feeling since the casserole. Nothing that resembled what I used to feel, and everything that resembled clarity. 6 months after the divorce, Nadine texted me for the first time. She said she missed the house. She said she missed our routine. She said maybe we could have coffee and talk about things. I read the text twice. I read it sitting at the same kitchen table where she'd served me divorce papers with a smiley face. The same table where she'd kept chewing while she ended our marriage. The same table where she told me she needed a better man. I thought about the smiley face. I thought about the way she kept scrolling her phone while she told me she was leaving. I thought about the word boring, and the phrase let himself go and the tilted head when I asked how she planned to support herself.
She said he works too much, bro. The man is dead-ass working doubles, so she can take an $800 photography course that produced 0 photos. And her complaint is that he works too much. You can't make this up.
I thought about $620,000. I thought about the $800 photography course that produced 0 photographs. I thought about every 5 a.m. alarm I set while she slept until 10. I thought about all of that, and I texted back 2 words. No thanks. She replied with a long message about how I had changed and how I used to be kind and how she didn't recognize me anymore. She said the man she married would have never talked to her the way I talk to her now. She said she hoped I was happy alone. I didn't respond. She was right about one thing. I had changed. I was no longer the man who would cook a casserole on a Tuesday and accept a smiley face sticky note on divorce papers as a normal way to end a decade of marriage. I was no longer the man who would deposit $3,000 a month into someone's account so she could feel independent while being the opposite of it. I was no longer the man who confused being needed with being loved because Nadine never loved me. She needed me. And the moment she thought she didn't, she slid an envelope across the table and kept eating. Niall asked me last month if I'd ever get married again. I said I didn't know. He said just make sure the next one has a job. I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed about any of it. I asked him if it ever fully goes away, the feeling of having been used. He said it doesn't go away. It just stops being the loudest thing in the room. He was right about that too. The house is mine again. Just mine. I repainted the bedroom that Nadine had redecorated 3 times. I picked a color I actually liked for the first time since I'd owned the place. I canceled the 6 streaming services and kept one. I canceled the wine club. I canceled the clothing boxes. My monthly expenses dropped by $4,200, and I felt that drop like a physical weight coming off my shoulders. I started putting money into a retirement account, something I'd never been able to do consistently, because Nadine's lifestyle consumed every spare dollar I earned. At 41 years old, I was starting a retirement fund for the first time. That fact alone tells you everything you need to know about who I was married to. I kept the kitchen table where she served me the papers. I thought about getting rid of it, but I decided to keep it because every time I sit down to eat, I remember what it felt like to be worth less than a casserole to someone I'd given everything to. That memory doesn't hurt anymore.